Welcome everyone. Barachot habaot, barachim habaim, boker tov to some of you. Good morning, zaharayim tovim to others. Good afternoon. And in this part of the world where I am and a few others, Europe and Israel, erev tov, good evening. What a delight. What a source of gratitude to welcome you into my new 8-class course, Discovering a New Self Within and Beyond. As we are preparing for the new year, what is it about our inner being that we can discover that is new to celebrate in the new year? Let's think about that. What would you like? What would you like to discover? Something new. That's what this class is about. That's what this course is about. I do want to remind those who have accepted my invitation to get a taste of the course with this first class, that if you choose, and I hope many of you, if not all of you, will want to continue, you do have to register through the different link to actually register. I will send that to all of you when I send the recording with the follow-up email after the class tomorrow. Okay, I'd like to begin. I want to make sure everyone, though, is muted. Make sure, please, if you would, to mute yourselves. Okay. I provided everyone with an introduction to the PSSNA Rebbe, Rav Kalanimus Kalmus Shapira. This is for your perusal, for your own personal and private studying, to get a sense. It's brief, but it really gives a picture of the profundity, the radicalness, and the newness that he brought to the Jewish world, that he brought to the world, actually. But I do want to share, as a means of introducing the course, for those who may have it by your side, you don't have to have it. I'm just going to read from the bottom of page 1 until the top of page 2. This is based on what I'm going to share on a book researched and written by Dr. Henry Abramson, which we will discuss during each class with each of the Torah from Eish Kodesh. He writes in his book, Torah from the Years of Wrath, the historical context of the Eish Kodesh, the following. Rabbi Shapira meditated on the essence of Chassidut in several of his works. For him, the spiritual enlightenment engendered by Chassidut was intrinsically related to the phenomenon of prophecy. And Chevra, this is what I invite you to direct your attention to. A different way of understanding a piece of wisdom from a great, great righteous and compassionate person. He really, really was sensitive to the world moving, and Jewish world in particular, into a new period of time. And this is the period of prophecies coming true, prophecies from 2,600 years ago during the times of the First Temple. Dr. Abramson continues, although prophetic insight into the future events, Nuvuah La'atid, had ended in the biblical period, argued the Rebbe, the communication between the divine and creation persisted in the form of prophetic instruction. It's called in Hebrew, Nuvuah Lahadracha. Prophecy, argued the Rebbe, did not end in the biblical period. It was merely altered. The Rebbe contended that God continued to maintain an open broadcast channel, and that with the appropriate spiritual training, one could receive divine inspiration. The development of this spiritual sensitivity was the primary goal of the PSSNA Chassidut. And I would like to suggest, through his teachings, through our sittings, through our own personal cultivation of whatever practice we relate to, we connect to, we can receive within a direct transmission that helps guide us as we take the next step along our journey. This was one of the, as I listed, 6 different unique innovations. They were all under this umbrella of reclaiming, uncovering, really celebrating and honoring the deeper part of ourselves that can actually gain access to the mystery of how do I take my next step along my journey. So in that light, I see there's a hand up, but I really can't address any questions until after there will be time. There will be time at the end. So if you would, just jot the question down. I appreciate that. Thank you. So what I'm going to do with each class or with each Torah, already the first Torah will take 2 classes. So that remember, those who signed up just for the first, you have to register for part 2 next week. But it's just impossible. This is one of his longest teachings. So what I'm going to do, though, before each new teaching, I'm going to share with you, in fact, from Dr. Abramson's book, Torah from the Years of Wrath, 1939 to 1943, and he provides the historical context within which the Piasetzner was living and therefore teaching. So if you look at page 1, this is all in English. The book was written in English. So we're not yet diving into the actual text, but I feel this is very important that we have an understanding of what he faced, what he saw around him, as he was always seeing reality through the lens of either the Parshat HaShavua or through the Chag, through the holiday. The striking originality of the Rebbe's writings are apparent from the very first sermon, delivered on September 14th, 1939. We're in September now. This is September 5th. In a few more weeks, it will be Rosh Hashanah. So in this book that we're going to, over the next, through the 8 classes, discover, explore various Torot, the very first teaching was now, it was then in the Jewish calendar, in the Hebrew calendar, Rosh Hashanah already on September 14th. In fact, it is almost impossible to compare his work to any other document that survived the Holocaust. The Rebbe's approach, with a few notable exceptions, never made explicit reference to specific historical events in the ghetto. That's what's amazing. He never addressed specifically. He did address, but it's through a different lens. This is not to say that the Rebbe turned a blind eye to the suffering of his congregation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rather, the Rebbe adopted a literary style that approached the core concerns of his audience from an oblique angle, artfully couching his message in the discussion of the weekly Torah reading. The rhetorical method, sometimes referred to as, I'm not clear how to pronounce it, Aesopian or Aesopian, from like Aesop, like a fable. It's always with these stories and metaphors. I think it's Aesopian or Aesopian language, for its allegorical nature serves several purposes. Many Warsaw diarists, not only the Piasetzner, employed some version of coded language, which is what that type of language is, fearing reprisals if their documents were discovered by the Nazis. Aesopian or Aesopian language also allowed the Rebbe to remain compliant with Jewish law, which forbids public signs of mourning on Shabbat and on the holidays. Aesopian language allowed the Rebbe to convey his central message in an artfully indirect manner that was often more powerful than a straightforward exhortation. The Rebbe's sophisticated veiling of contemporary realities within the weekly scriptural reading removed the fundamental axis of history from the ghetto and placed it within the Torah. Can you imagine? It's another way of learning Parshat HaShavua through this book. It's like he lifted the teaching out of what caused it, which apparently externally was the worsening week after week after week of what was going on in Warsaw, which eventually became the Warsaw Ghetto. I mean, at this point in history, it's not a ghetto yet. It's just where most of the Jewish people are living. But he lifted it up with his teaching, literally elevated it, and put it into the Torah, so to speak. His literary style reinforced the message week after week that the answer to the existential questions posed by the Holocaust lay not within the pages of the ghetto press, not in the rumors circulating through the ghetto, but within the text of the weekly Torah portion and the teachings of the sages. This approach allowed the Rebbe to construct his remarks for an audience beyond 5 Dezelina. That was his home, which was also his Beit Midrash, where he taught. It is clear that the Rebbe believed that the Torah's message transcended the time and place of the Warsaw Ghetto and framed his remarks with a view to us, to future readers. And this is my hope, and this is part of my objective, and I believe it's part of my own inner calling of why I'm so driven to teach these Torot, because it is our Torot for our time and place as much as it was when it was born, when it was actually revealed. It's as if he's alive now teaching it in our world with our situations, which of course are very radically different than the Holocaust or the beginnings of this World War II. The first sermon is a formal Rosh Hashanah address. Unlike the vast majority of entries delivered in the more intimate setting of the afternoon third meal, the Sudat Shalishit, the Rosh Hashanah sermon was probably delivered from the pulpit on the morning of the holiday. It is likely that the audience was smaller than earlier years. Why? It's Rosh Hashanah. Why would he say this? Think about this. Well, because there were air raids that blanketed Warsaw shortly after the beginning of the war on September 1st. This is only 2 weeks later. But the annual Rosh Hashanah Drasha remained one of the most important public addresses of the liturgical year. At 1800 words, it is indeed much longer than almost all entries in his wartime writings. But under such conditions, it is remarkable that the Rebbe spoke at all, because Warsaw was under constant bombardment, one air attack after the next. The primary value of the sermon is its theological message, but the full import of the Rebbe's words cannot be grasped without an awareness of the immediate historical context of its presentation. As we mentioned above, Jewish law frowns upon the discussion of sad or distressing news on Shabbat or the holidays, preventing the Rebbe from referring openly to the terror without, even though that was precisely the burning issue on the mind of everyone in the audience. Remember, World War I ended in 1918. This is only 21 years later. And as more than one historian has mentioned, the only reason we don't discuss the horrors of World War I as much as we may have is because of what happened in World War II. And this is only 18 years later. I mean, 28 years, wait, what did I say? 21 years later, 1918 to 1939. So there was terror throughout these air raids, these bombings of Warsaw. With a handful of notable exceptions, though, the Rebbe never deviated from this pious and heroic literary practice. Where do we see, by the way, today that we don't show signs of mourning on Shabbat or a Chag? Think about that. For those who have ever had to sit Shiva, we know that when one sits Shiva, it's a whole week, there's always Shabbat, or it could be also a Chag. That's when we shower, we get up, we go out, we will go to the synagogue if we choose to. We don't show public signs of mourning when we're sitting Shiva on the Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat. So here it is. Can you imagine 2 weeks into the war, Warsaw is being bombed and bombarded with bombings, and he doesn't address it. He does address it, but he doesn't address it. Let us therefore put ourselves in the Beit Midrash on 5 Dizeln Street with the Rebbe on Thursday, September 14th, 1939, the first day of Rosh Hashanah of the Hebrew year 5700. 2 weeks earlier, Germany attacked the western border, toppling the nearby major city of Szczecin within 2 days. Warsaw hurriedly prepared its defenses, but the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, dominated the skies, bombing at will all Varsovians, meaning Warsaw citizens, Polish and Jewish alike, were called to mobilize for work and self-defense duties. By September 7th, a mass flight of Warsaw citizens to the east ensued. What was east of Poland? Who was in east of Poland? Think about that. Soviet Union. The friendliest place for the Jewish people, and Jewish people fled. Many leading citizens fled, including the Polish government and its commander-in-chief. Prominent figures in the rabbinic establishment also left the city, correctly fearing that they would be signaled out for special abuse from the Nazis. Notably, the Rebbe refused to join this exodus, and in fact, refused all future offers to be taken to safety if it meant separation from his Hasidim. He did not, however, insist that his followers remain within the city. Aviva Kurwasa Saddam, a survival of the ghetto. Now, a lot of people, just briefly, there was this whole campaign called the Oneg Shabbos campaign. And there was an effort made for people to write down their memoirs, their diaries, poetry, whatever. So it was going to all be buried, which it was in January of 1943, with the hopes that someday it would be these documents, these memoirs, would be discovered. They were buried in metal milk canisters. And in fact, in 1950, several of them were discovered. Many of them are exhibited here in Jerusalem, in Yad Vashem, some in Warsaw, some, I think, in Washington, D.C. So it wasn't only the Rebbe's writings that were discovered. This person, Aviva Kurwasa Saddam, she wrote something down. And the reason why this campaign was so important is because if Jewish people did not do this, the world would never know what happened, because they'd only know it through the lens of the Nazis. So this is what she writes. And actually, she was a survivor of the ghetto. She recorded the Rebbe's advice to her father in her memoirs, Liot al-Kavaketz. Papa returns home from the house of the PSS and the Rebbe after evening prayers with a sad face. He gathers us, the daughters, around him and says the following: difficult days are approaching for the Jews of Warsaw. According to the Rebbe's advice, you must escape from the ghetto as soon as possible. All your lives, you girls have been faithful to the Torah and the commandments. But from this moment on, you are exempt. I mean, do you realize what he's saying? What her father said in the name of the Piasetzner. You need to save your lives. You are exempt from all mitzvot observance. In the name of heaven, you are commanded in relation to one thing alone: save your lives. After the storm has passed, I mean, with such, we have to be careful when we read some of these words, because we're learning this after the fact. We're learning this afterwards. After the storm has passed, 6 million people's lives have been murdered. But that's not what the Rebbe thought. They probably thought it was like World War I. It'll be tough for a few years, but eventually it will be over. So after the storm has passed, come home. Now, I don't know, by the way, I have in brackets there, in parentheses, in my own remark, come home to what? To Warsaw, or come home to the Torah? Or maybe both. The Nazis reached Warsaw on Friday, September 8th. That's when they began the land occupation. They did not immediately enter the city, but brutalized it with mortar and artillery fire. This is after a week of bombing, of air bombings, punishing airstrikes, after a week of sheltering in cellars for the fear of the angel of death. Dropping death from the skies, the Jews of Warsaw cautiously prepared to greet the new year, 5700. Just hold that. Let us hold that for a moment. What it took to come out of hiding because of the airstrikes, now the artillery strikes, to go and hear a piece of Torah from the Rebbe, to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the new year, having no idea at all what would be in the future. The Rebbe argued that fear, of course, everyone was petrified. The Rebbe argued that fear should be embraced as a sign that a person recognizes the proximity of God on Rosh Hashanah. This is part of what his teaching is going to discuss. He turns it upside down on its head, inside out. Instead of saying, oh, you have nothing to be afraid of, trust in God. You have everything to be afraid of, trust in God. A chassid cannot sink into desperation, but he or she can give voice to the fear in prayer, in the sound of the shofar. Could you imagine how they heard Tekiyat Shofar that year? What were they hearing? The Rebbe did not argue that fear should be ignored. On the contrary, properly channeled, the fear itself is the vehicle for salvation. The trepidation caused by the advance of Nazis was in itself a spiritual lever by which the Jews could propel their closeness to God. In so doing, they would, like Jews in the past, bring about their own redemption. This is what his hopes were. So now we move to the actual teaching, the first teaching in this Sefer. And in Hebrew it's called, he never called it Ish Kodesh. He called it Chidushei Torah Mishanot Haza'am. New Torah, Torah innovations, Divrei Torah from the years of fury, from the years of wrath. That's how he titled the book. It was only after the manuscripts were discovered, then later when they were published, that's when the name Eish Kodesh became the name that the teachings are referred to by. Okay, so in the beginning of this teaching, he introduces this teaching by quoting two Pesukim that we recite on Rosh Hashanah right before the blowing of the shofar. I'll let you read those on your own. I do want to bring, though, your attention to something that's very important. There are two verses in all of the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, that actually refer to this holiday, which later on, much later on, became known as Rosh Hashanah. Both verses, you may want to jot this down. Vayikra Chaf Gimel, Chav Gimel Chav Daled in Leviticus 23, verses 23 and 24, and in Bamidbar Chav Tet Aleph in Numbers 29, verse 1. I'm going to read the Hebrew and translate, and I'm asking you to pay attention to how this day is referred to in the actual Chumash. V'yidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, speak to the children of Israel, say the following, B'chodesh hashvi'i, in the 7th month, all the Torah dates begin with Nisan, the month that Pesach occurs in, as the 1st month. Tishrei, which is the 7th month, is the beginning of a new calendar year. However, in the actual Torah dates, when the verse enumerates a date, it's always going, the first goes back to Nisan with Pesach as the 1st. So in the 1st month, Be'echad l'chodesh, on the 1st day, on the 7th month, on the 1st day of the 7th month, Yelechem, there shall be for you the following. First of all, Shabbaton, a day of rest, like Shabbat. It has the word Shabbat in it, Shabbaton. Zikaron, a day of remembering. Truah, a day of blowing the shofar, or literally just the day of blasting. Mikre Kodesh, a holy convocation. So what's missing? What's missing is just about everything we do to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, except blowing the shofar. In the book of Numbers, similarly, U'b'chodesh hashvi'i, in the 7th month, Be'echad l'chodesh, on the 1st of the month, Mikre Kodesh yelechem, a holy convocation, a holy day shall be for you. Kol melechet avodah, avodah lo ta'asu, you shall not do any labor, work of labor. Yom Truah, again we see the word Truah, the blasting, which we learn later came to mean the shofar, Yelechem. So all we know from these 2 verses, we know nothing about Shana Tova, a happy new year. We know nothing about Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. These are 2 major themes in the liturgy on Rosh Hashanah. Now, the mitzvah of the day is the blowing of the shofar, hearing the shofar. Only one person blows it, but we all hear it. So I want to invite you to appreciate when the Rebbe is going to teach what he's teaching, it's after centuries and centuries of the tradition through the oral Torah, through the Mishnah, through the Gemara, through the Midrashim, through all the Agadot. We start with, and I'll point out the different themes, but really the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, what we call Rosh Hashanah, the 1st day of the 7th month, is to blast the shofar. And according to Rashi, that's to remember what happened at the Akedah, when Abraham went to sacrifice and offer Yitzchak up on the altar. In his stead, instead of offering his son, he offered a ram, and there was a ram's horn. And that's how we learn through the oral Torah that we use a ram's horn. So some of our older tradition in the Midrash believes that Yom, the Zikaron here, is to remember what happened before this. Well, what happened before this is the book of Genesis. Everything in the book of Genesis happened before this. It's only later we learn that this is on the 1st day of the 7th month is when Adam and Eve were created. The world was created, the very beginning, Bereshit, in the beginning was on the 25th of Elul. The very first day of what we call now Rosh Hashanah is when Adam and Eve were created. And what happened on the very day that they were created? They made that big fatal mistake. And because they made that fatal mistake, and they were asked or told that they have to leave the garden. No, they were not suspended. They were like, you're out. Because they brought upon themselves mortality. Through that, we have the tradition that this is the day of the year that God reviews all of its creations and decide if those creations will live for the next year. And that's how it became known as Yom Hadin. It's Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, because that's when the human being was created. Okay. We'll begin now the text. Oh gosh. Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yemei Teshuva, V'Yom HaKippurim, Hein Yamim Shenimtza Behem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of returning or of turning of Teshuva, and Yom HaKippur, and actually it starts with Rosh Hashanah and concludes with Yom Kippur. Those are the 10 days. They're called the Aseret Yemei Teshuva. These are very special days. These are days where it's very easy, more than any other time of the year, to find God. Kedrashat Chachamenu Zal ala pasuk, as our sages explain, and someone's asking on which page that you should. I'm on page 3. I'm on page 3 in the top. There's a verse in Yeshayahu, in Isaiah. Jashu Hashem b'hi matz'o. And what does that mean? Seek God. The word lidrosh is to seek, look for. Seek God while he may be found. B'hi matz'o. What does that mean, when he may be found? Well, it really, to understand that, we need to understand another verse that came much earlier in the Chumash, in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of in Devarim, Deuteronomy. K'Hashem Eloheinu b'chol kar'enu elav. That's in chapter 4, verse 7, in Deuteronomy. As is the Lord, K'Hashem Eloheinu, our God, b'chol kar'ehu elav. Whenever we call out to him. Now that implies that there's always a way to draw close to God. What we just heard from Yeshayahu is it implies that there are specific times when it's easier, when it's more likely. So isn't that a contradiction? So the way the rabbis figured this out is that in terms of community, a group of people, which is why it's important to be in community. It doesn't matter. We can call on God, and God is apparent. There's this indwelling of Shekhinah. There's this like magic when we get together and we eat together, sing together, pray together, when we do anything together, especially when we're united, ba'achdut, we sense the presence. However, as an individual, so this is what's asked in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in the Sechet Rosh Hashanah, page 18, side A. B'yachid emat. What about the individual? When is it most opportune? When is it really the best time, the easiest time, an auspicious time for me to find God? That's what Yeshayahu meant. When is the right time where it's just a little bit easier? I don't have to struggle so much. Amar Avahu, Elo Aseret Yemei, Asara Yamim Sheben Rosh Hashanah Liyom HaKippurim. These are the 10 days where any one of us as individuals, we don't have to be in community, on our own, in our own private, personal practice. It's just more obvious. Even from the Baal Shem Tov, he teaches us you may have heard, some of you have heard perhaps, of the king is in the field, HaMelech B'Sadeh. Usually the king is in the palace, and very few people gain entry into the palace, and even fewer actually gain entry into the throne room where the king is sitting on his, or the queen is sitting on her throne. But these 10 days, it's a mashal, it's a parable, a metaphor. The king leaves the palace and comes into the field where we all are, in our dirty clothes, working in the field. So that's how the Baal Shem Tov understands, and that's how the Gemara understands the verse from Yeshayahu. Yes, it is during the whole month of Elul, and also into the 10 days of the Aseret Yemei Teshuva. Thank you, Paulina. Yes, I see that. That's an important, it's the whole month of Elul. However, the rabbis of the Talmud, they specified that is the 10 days of Teshuvah. It was only later through Chassidut, through the Baal Shem Tov, that it became also the whole month of Elul, which we're in now. So lechen, therefore, for an individual who really can like seek out God when he may be found, therefore, what's going to happen when I find God? It's not just a matter of, oh, I found you. No, first of all, the God we're looking for is a peace inside of me, inside of you. We're not looking for a philosophy or a theology or for this like infinite source of everything. It's the divine as she inhabits within us as the Shekhinah. That is discovering a new self. Therefore, what happens when we do this? Lechen mehitgalut ha'elokit lenafsho shel ha'ish ya'ato yitbarach mitoleret b'chol echad v'yeta sa'ed v'yeta oz. What they were saying is during this period of time, there is a revelation, there's a hitgalut. There's a revelation of God which is manifest in the soul of every person. Every person. Therefore, the Yirato Yitbarach, having reverence for the divine, becoming aware. I prefer to teach the word Yirah from Ro'eh. I see, I have a perception. There's an awareness of the divine. And what does this do? It arouses us. It wakes us up. Each person with greater clarity, with greater strength. This is what happens now. We wake up. We wake up in the month of Elul. We wake up on Rosh Hashanah. We wake up through our own yirah, through our own awesomeness, our own experiencing the divine with a sense of, wow, I never knew, I never imagined, I never even dreamt it could be this amazing. That's what Heschel means, to dwell in radical every day, be in radical amazement. Here, so this is not just 10 days. These are very special 10 days, and everything we're doing now in Elul, we're waking up to that. So then the PSSna asks, why is there this perceived closeness? Why is it most noticeable at this time of the year? What is it about what happens on Rosh Hashanah? Legalot malchuto yitbarach. Because what is being revealed is not only, oh, I feel the divine, but I feel the divine that created me. I feel the divine as a creator. I sense the sovereignty, the malchut, the kingship, queenship, the monarchy of the divine. For the creator to have created me, this is fine-tuning the sensitivity, the spiritual awareness that I am not the creator of the world. I am a creation in the world. I am created by the creator. Now that's awesome. Because through the oral tradition, this day, the first day of the 7th month, Yom Teruah, also has become known as the day that I was created as a human being. So whoever created me, God, and we say God, has sovereignty. I am acknowledging God's sovereignty over all of creation. Ki hayom harat olam. We say this in the liturgy. What does harat mean? The shorish, for those who know Hebrew, hey resh hey. When a woman is expecting, we say she's beherayon. It's comparing creation of the world to being pregnant and giving birth. V'kol habriya legalot malchuto yitbarach al Yisrael hayata. Amazing. What happens here, the whole purpose of creation, kol habriya. Kol habriya. The whole purpose of from when God said, even let there be light. All of that is to reveal God's sovereignty. May that sovereignty be blessed over the people of Israel and by extension, all of humanity. I would think this is why Yeshayahu says in his prophecy that every nation has a mandate, has a purpose, has a yu'ud to share with the world. Ours is to put light into the world. This is the light, to share with the world that the whole purpose of creation is to reveal the Creator. That we're not here by accident. We're not just made up of cells, atoms, molecules. We are a nivra, we are a created being with purpose, purpose that's been assigned to us by the Creator. So we've moved now from this awareness to now a revelation of sovereignty. Because we're more sensitive to this day, not only being a Yom Teruah, but also a Yom HaZikaron, a day of remembering the creation of the world and each of our places in that creation. And from that, we can then accept the sovereignty upon us. There is the can everyone please make sure you're muted, if you would? I'd be very indebted to you. Thank you. The Rebbe does not use the word ma'od a lot. So when he uses it, he really means very. The word ma'od means very much. We really need, during the 10 days, these 10 days, to really awaken the inner sense of I sense heaven, meaning I'm sensing the divine. More than any other time of the year, this is part of our work, is to in fact, discover a new self within and then beyond. Because the Yirah ba'atzma, the Yirah itself, the awareness of what we're being invited to become aware of, is Kabbalat Ol Machuto Yitbarach Aleinu. This awareness is a receiving. The word like Kabbalah, the works of Kabbalah means the receiving of this mystical tradition. Here, it's receiving what's called the Ol Malchut Shemayim, or the Ol Machuto Yitbarach. What does it mean to receive? It means I'm an active participant in this relationship. I am, through free will, I'm recognizing, I'm becoming aware, I'm cultivating yirah in my spirit, through my spiritual lens. And my reply back to when the shofar is being blown is I accept. All the yellings, the cryings, the pleas for health, for sustainability, both financially, spiritually, mental well-being, emotional well-being, everything, all the cries of the Jewish people heard in this period. This is a revelation. This is a hitgalut malchuto ukabalat malchuto yitbarach aleinu. This is what's upon us. It's a receiving. And hence we have another tradition. We have another understanding. What is going on when the shofar is being blown? It's the most important day for a king. There is in the Talmud, it's written, Ein melech bli am. There is no king without a nation. So in the human realm, if I, let's say, discover an island by myself, and I live on this island by myself, I proclaim me as the queen of the island. Well, who's coronating me? So the rabbis say, Ein melech, there is no king without an am. Now, God does not need us to exist, but God needs us to be king, because we receive the malchut, we receive the kingship, the sovereignty upon us. So when the shofar is being blown, that is the coronation. That is the coronation of the king. It's haktara from Keter. We're putting the crown, so to speak, as it were, kaviochol. We're putting the crown on God's head and acknowledging that God is our king, that God has sovereignty over all of creation. That's what's really happening here. That's what's really going on. Is that my life is part of something so much bigger. Rabbi Lu discusses this in This Is Real and You Are Totally Unprepared. That one of the reasons it's so important to meditate or to contemplate, to cultivate some practice during the month of Elul going into these 10 days by ourselves, is to really appreciate and experience, not only intellectually understand, but actually experience with our heart, that I'm part of something much bigger than me. Much, much bigger than me. And to relate to that, to connect to that part I'm discovering within me, have to that reality, that awareness to go beyond, I need to sit. I really need to cultivate contemplative practice, because to no longer live with the pressure, aside from it not even being true, but the pressure that everything begins and ends with me and every decision I make, well, we see what it has led to in the world today. I'll let you all define what you see in the world today. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah is more than just the day of the blasting of the shofar. It's the day of Yirah. It's the day of perception, of awareness. It's the day of a revelation of sovereignty. It's the day of creation and remembering that. It's the day of accepting and coronating. So I can now be part of something like a web of living. Just picture every thread of the web is interconnected with every other thread. How beautiful, how wonderful of a holiday. And yes, my life is on the line. Now my life is really worth living. So it is Yom Hadin, it is a day of judgment, and I accept that upon myself. Okay, let's move to the top of page 4. I have to begin to bring this to a temporary close till next week. Afilu habakashot al tzachiyotenu gam ken min hitgalut malchuto v'kilushu. Even the requests that I make during this time, or that will be from my own personal needs, my physical needs, that also is a revelation of God's sovereignty. It's also a form of praising God. Why? Who else will I ask? Who else will I ask? When I see my little grandchildren, my 2- and 3-year-old grandchildren, constantly demanding, requesting, beseeching my daughter, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. Why do they go to her with all of that? Because they know she'll give it to them. She'll give them the food, she'll give them the milk, she'll give them the fruit, she'll give them the toys. So when I say to God, oh, I want to have not only spiritual health, I want to have physical health. I want to be able to teach more and have my practice grow. And I want to be able to afford the rent in my beautiful home. Well, who else should I? That is a form of praising and acknowledging God's very sovereignty over my life. Because then I am expressing, I'm acknowledging through that God's sovereignty. And I receive, I actually accept God's sovereignty upon me. And that's a form of Teshuva. V'shavim elav. I'm actually returning to a deeper, deeper level of awareness of God. V'gam mevakshim mimenu sheyaspik lanu et tzarachatenu. So we ask of Hashem that he satisfy, shemaspik, that he meets our needs. Who else will fulfill my needs? The needs of Bnei Yisrael, the needs of those of us who are in service to God, if not the Blessed One. Melech Melechei HaMelechim, the King of Kings. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who? Who? This. Not only is the PSS suggesting it's okay to ask on Rosh Hashanah for that promotion at work. It's okay to ask to be able to afford your new mortgage. It's okay, whatever it is you feel, God will decide if you need it. God will decide if you receive it, but it's okay to ask. As a spiritual person, as a person who sees life through the lens of spirituality, you can ask for that, because this very asking, ba'atzmo hakibus, this is a form of praise. Shemakirimu makablim aleinu et malchuto, because I'm acknowledging and receiving upon me God's sovereignty. So this is a defining moment as we enter into a relationship with our king, queen, with a defined role. My role now is defined as I'm a created being, and I'm entering a relationship with my creator. And on that note, we shall pause till next week. So let's sit for a short time in silent contemplative practice. And I invite you for the next several moments, 7 minutes, to consider, to think, to feel, what ideas do you come up with when you think of yourself as a created being? What do you feel? What does it feel like to be a created being by a creator? And that you can actually be in relationship with this creator. Let us share, as is my tradition, my minhag, to begin the sit with bringing our mind, body, heart, soul together and with each other by sharing 3 focused, directed, compassionate acts of receiving the gift of Nishmat Chayim, the breath of life, holding and gazing at her, at the Nishima, and then with gratitude, returning it. And then as we settle into those 3 rhythms, that rhythm, let's begin to imagine, to visualize, through thinking, through feeling, what does it mean to be a nivra, a created being? And let us close our practice by sharing three cleansing, compassionately directed, being aware of the act of receiving, holding, and returning life. Toda kulam, toda to all of you. Thank you so much. What an incredible group of souls filling up this Zoom room. Amazing. We have now 15 minutes of dedicated time for your questions, also for your insights. And I'd like you to, I neglected to conclude the text of today's sharing by reminding us when this was taught and by whom. Think about physical needs. Why do you think he's so makpid, so careful and exact to remind us it's okay to ask God for your personal needs? Yeah, like right now we're being bombed, we're being invaded. I may not have time to ask for spiritual openings and spiritual illuminations and spiritual arousings and awakenings, but God, can you save me, please? So that's his way of responding by emphasizing what he did. He was very aware, very aware. But notice he never talked about bombs, Germans, World War, invasion, occupation. So I open the floor now to everyone. If you have a question, use the emoji down below. I think that's what it's called, the sign for, and I'll just call upon you. Okay, Natalie, please.
I didn't think I was that fast. I'm in my mid 60s, and when I was in my 20s, 30s, I found meditation to be quite easy. After a kind of a tough life, I've come back to Judaism and have been in a very great studying place. Everything from the Tanakh to the Tonya, and everything in between. But the one thing that I'm having really tough time with is meditating. And I've been trying a couple years now to get my brain to stop and just be still. And I'm wondering if you have, because this text is so important, if you have any advice or hints on how to get it moving, to get to that place where that stillness is easier to ask for, to reach, to thrive within. I need help.
Yeah, in that area, we all do, for sure, because every day is a different day. And yes, so to answer, I'll give you the short answer, and I'll send the name of the book in the email when I send out the recording. There is a book by Rabbi Pinson about addressing breath, just to breathe, to be, well, we are being breathed into, and how that plays itself out in settling, in settling down. My only other two pieces of insight is the more we try to make something happen when we sit, the less likely it's going to happen. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I've been learning and relearning over the past 12, 13 years that I've been cultivating this type of practice. So what really is the practice, when we say the practice, whether it's contemplative, where you're contemplating, where you're trying to really let go or visualize. There's so many different ways to sit with oneself. There's also, by the way, there's meditation with movement, which is a whole nother discipline. And I can share some of that. I practiced Qigong, for example, which comes from China 2,500 years ago. However, all of it, use this opportunity when you're sitting, if you're struggling, ask the divine for guidance. Ask, like you even said it, God, I can't do this alone. I'm your created being. If you really want me, and I do believe you want me to be more of a settled, Yeshuv Hadat, to have a settled mind, help me. I can't do this alone. That in of itself will help. So that's my immediate response. And I will put in the email, follow-up email, the name of this book. Stephen is citing it. So yes, I will point that out for you and for everyone else. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability with us and your sincere forthrightness. We all are challenged. All of us are challenged, whether we do it every day for 10 years or we're just trying it for the first time, or we're midway, wherever we are. Every day we are new, and what we experience is new. And yes, so thank you. Okay, Sima, please.
So I just want to say, from your very first words, my heart started trembling. The words of, we can receive direct transmission, like right there. My heart was like, really? I can? Even me? I can? And then I started, when you started talking about what was going on in Warsaw, thinking how desperate they must have been. Are we forgotten? Are you here? Do you know what's going on? Like, how desperate for that transmission, and how he gave them the hope. And then thinking about the shofar and all about these teachings yesterday, which you guys go so beautifully following, but wondering, were they screaming, where's our ram? Hashem, we don't want to be, where's our ram? So there was that very moving. And then at the end about the created being, I went to a very human place of being a mother and a daughter, right? So as a daughter, 18, you go up to college, goodbye. And my mom probably sitting by the phone, are you there? What's going on? How are you? Can you talk to me? What do you need? And then as a mother, when my kid calls and says, oh, can you stop at Trader Joe's on your way up to New Hampshire? Because here's what I need. I'm like, thank you for giving me something to do to connect even that way. So connecting to what does it feel like to be a created being through the mother yearning for the connection. And I'm wondering, is God saying, hey, Sima, I haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? Talk to me, like the same way a mother. So it was all very moving, and I can't wait to see what's next. And thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Toda. Thank you. Okay, Tova.
Hi. I had one of those unexpected experiences, and I think it's important to share them so that everybody can be open to having an unexpected experience. When we meditate, I just felt loved. It's not what I didn't think that was going to happen, but it did. And I thought quite the other thing, but in terms of spiritual experiences, sometimes these things just happen. And I guess the more you open up to them, the more the surprise can happen.
Thank you, Tova. Thank you. I know there were several other people who had raised their hands, but it just disappeared. So I'll ask you if you would to please re-raise your hand with that sign if you have a question. I don't know what happened to it. It's odd. Let me see. Okay, Robin. Yes, Robin.
I just wanted to say one thing about meditating, then I have my question.
Okay.
You can't fight it. Those thoughts are part of meditating. They come and they go. And it's like that old poem, the guest house. They just have to flow in and out. Don't really fight it. Eventually it'll come.
Thank
That's
you.
how I've been meditating for many years. The other thing is, I have great difficulty accepting, like, why such good people suffer, just like the Holocaust. I mean, that's my problem. You know, like even today, what's going on in the Ukraine. I mean, it's upsetting to me. You know, I can't. How do I equate that with God being the sovereign and omnipotent? That every day it bothers me. I know you can't really answer it, but that's my feeling. But
Well,
I loved your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. And I'll only quote the Lubavitcher Rebbe, may the memory of a tzaddik be for a blessing. When he was alive and he was asked on one Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day here in Israel, someone asked him, is it okay to ask God, where were you in the Holocaust? So this was the Rebbe's answer. How could you be a living, breathing creation and a Jew and not ask that question? Just don't expect an answer. So the question, yes, I ask the question every day also. I'm not asking it to receive an answer. I'm asking it to feel closer. Because if I don't ask the question, then maybe it means I feel distant from God. So as long as I can ask the question, I still believe in God. It's when I, God forbid, no longer ask the question.
I guess that feeling comes from God. That suffering.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Ben. Shalom, Ben.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this. This is beautiful. I was curious if either in the memoirs or in your studies elsewhere, you've seen how the people responded to his teachings and his messages through this time.
Actually, Doctor, great question, a great question. And Dr. Abramson at times mentions it from different sources who jotted these responses down, and they were buried alongside the PSS in his writings. You know, there were different periods of time within the Warsaw Ghetto, from the beginning until, let's say, the spring or going into the summer of 1940. They really felt led, they felt encouraged, they had hope. And then as the first really major problem that really pushed them was when the walls actually went up and walled them in, so to speak. And there were food allotments that were decreased. There were no more mikvaot, no more shachtin. When a lot of their Jewish ritual, a lot of our own, what we do as Jews in community began to fall apart. They were holding on. They were still holding on from what I only know from Dr. Abramson. So my knowledge of that is quite limited. There are several books, though, that have been published. I have a list on my, when I have all the other books read, books written by survivors who were there, and they give accounts of what it was like. But at least we have something from Dr. Abramson through other people. He quotes other people's, and they're footnoted very well. So I wish I could give a better answer or a more full answer, but
thank you. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Betsy. Shalom, Betsy.
Thank you, Yiska. I'm going back to your original question or your advice to going into our sit of thinking of ourselves as a created being. And I have a practice of every day, especially thinking about the phrase in the morning prayers about She'asani B'Tzalmo. And I guess my question as a very, very rudimentary Hebrew learner is if there's any clue in the Hebrew about, I guess, what is translated into English as image, because image is visual. And it's precisely it's precisely what's invisible. that we have in common with God, I think.
It's
So I'm just
imageless,
kind of, yeah,
imageless.
yeah. Yeah, so what does it mean to be made in the image of something invisible to the, to the human eye? What is, I
But-
guess maybe it's just as simple as, oh yeah, another paradox. That's kind of what we were getting used to in our
No,
spiritual searching. But if there's anything in the Hebrew, that's what I'd love to know.
Well, it's not so much that it's in the Hebrew language. The PSSNet does talk about this in B'nai Machshava Tova, which is a whole nother course. We will not be discussing it in this course, but there he believes that the practice of being able to awaken a feeling that comes from an experience that you've had in your life in the physical world. So let's say I love vanilla ice cream, especially on a hot day. So when I'm eating the vanilla ice cream, I feel renewed, I feel woken up, I feel relaxed, I feel good. I want to feel that way with God. So through the visualization, what I begin to do as I'm feeling it in my mind, which is an image, I then drop off gradually from the ice cream and I'm just holding the feeling. And that's what's imageless. I'm able to take my 5 senses and actually use them in the spiritual, not only in the physical. That for the PSSNet is one of his main goals, is to help us, like he even says in one of the entries, don't be so sure that when you see something or when you hear something or taste something, that it's limited to the physical. So when we are created in the image, or someone suggested in the likeness of God, it's to be able to experience life in the spiritual and not only in the physical. And that's why he emphasizes the opening of the heart, because each feeling that he calls a mafteach, a key, is a key to the soul. So it's beginning to appreciate the sensations. I feel tired, I feel rejuvenated, I feel disappointed, I feel inspired, where they all are part of this spiritual toolbox with which to be more present spiritually. And what that means is to be more aware of the divine's presence. That's what that means. And because we were created in the likeness, and we're the only creation, only the human being, we actually can do this. We can actually make a decision to cultivate this and become aware of being created in the tselem, but the imageless, the non-physical tselem, the experience of the divine. That's what that means from the PSSNet's teachings. Thank you. Avi.
Thank you, and thank you for the teaching. I do see we're running out of time, so I will try to keep it brief. But I resonated and appreciated and connected with the meditation, particularly because Nadia and I have a human currently being created in Nadia's stomach. So thinking of the concept and idea of being created was something really profound for me to think about, that we are creating something in partnership with God. And just to think back in the meditation to, the fact that I was created, firstly, I felt, like Tova said, I felt the feeling of being loved, because typically something you create, you love. And I also felt the feeling of really being something special, someone special, because typically when you create something, it's a unique creation and it's special. And the final thing that I felt was a feeling of having a purpose, because who would create something with no reason, for no purpose? So it is a very profound meditation for me in terms of feeling love, feeling special, and feeling like I have a purpose. So thank you, and I'll see you next week.
Tada. Lorna.
Iska, thank you so much for this fantastic session. I'll be brief also. I'll echo Avi's reaction. I had the same kind of reactions to the meditation. Well, I wanted to just pose a question that I have a lot of difficulty with, and because time is short and because it's a tough question. I'm not really expecting an answer. I'm just focusing on the line here on the second page. The trepidation caused by the Nazis was in itself a spiritual lever by which the Jews could propel their closeness to God. So on the one hand, I'm very struck by the Rebbe's deep belief in the face of, the nihilism that was around him. But at the same time, I'm kind of really troubled by this statement, because what does it say about God's plan? If this is if this advance of the Nazis was in itself a spiritual lever, is it part of God's plan then to, increase the closeness to God? So that's one part of the question. And then I also ask myself, how did he deal with the doubts about God's existence? And someone before alluded to that must have been in people's minds. Certainly, increasingly was as the war wore on. So I'm just kind of struck by it and troubled by it at the same time.
So am I.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons I believe I'm troubled by it is because I know what happens after this.
Well, that's right. Exactly.
And that's part of the
Yes.
the challenge. We have to transport ourselves into 2 weeks into the war,
Mhm.
not after 6 million perished.
Right. But then,
Yeah.
the sort of related question is, if he had lived, how would he have dealt with that?
Well,
I mean, would he have had the same depth of belief? I don't know.
My only clarity that I can say with real clarity that I believe the PSS was teaching through his last teaching, which is right Erev Teshuva of 1942, the day before the transports to Treblinka began. He never wavered, wavered. Well, he never showed that he wavered.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
in strongly believing that everything that was happening, included God, was in fact brought about by God. Now that could trouble everybody. That was his faith, because of the verse in Deuteronomy, Ein od milvado, there is nothing outside of God's existence.
That's right. You can't have it both ways.
You
cannot
can't,
have
yes,
it both ways.
yes. And that's
Okay.
what the trepidation is, the spiritual lever. Because when we are afraid, we know in our, see, I try to take, when people question the magnitude of the Holocaust, I don't even know what 6 million lives, and also the people that didn't perish, what their lives had become.
Right.
I don't know what that's like, but I do know what one life is like, or a few people's lives. So if we bring it down to that, when any one of us struggle, I doubt any one of us really believes that we're struggling because we like to struggle. Like, wow, God, thank you. You must really love me. I'm struggling so much. I'm poor. I don't have enough food. I don't have a roof over my head. I'm homeless. Wow, you really love me. However, the PSS and what he would want us to say, I'm homeless. God, somehow I know I'm supposed to feel your love in the middle of this, but I'm having real problems with that. But I do believe and I do trust that under it all, you love me. I just don't feel it right now. It's a whole different way of looking at one's personal suffering and then just expand it out.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more. Oh, okay, we have 3 more, and we're going to stop with, okay, Michelle, Sarah Joy, and Tiferet. And then we must say Lehitvaot for now. Okay, Michelle.
I'm thankful. Firstly, thank you so much. It's
You're
incredible.
welcome.
And when I'm going back to the meditation and trying to feel that what is my whole role here, the whole purpose. And he did teach that. When he was teaching, he didn't talk about the human aspects of what was happening and all the suffering. He didn't even mention it. And so I was thinking, I'm just upset about, my grandchild's having a hard time at school. I'm upset about this. And somebody else said Ukraine. And then I thought, we're just having all these human experiences, and it's not Is this just teaching? And then all it is there's this whole soul level, this whole spiritual level. And he was in the Warsaw Ghetto seeing all the horrors, and he didn't address this human suffering really, just that other, the spiritual, the soul. And he stayed there. And so I was just trying to think, like, what are we about here? Are we just here to just show love to everybody and help everybody in that way? But just trust that God will just, that's in a plan. Anyway, that's all I have to say. So a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
And Michelle, thank you for joining us. And it's wonderful to see you. And I want to add that human suffering is a fact of the human condition. And it's not limited to physical. It could be mental suffering, emotional suffering, spiritual suffering. And again, I want to remind us, just in the short pieces, the piece that we learned today, by him repeating that it's okay to go to God with your personal requests in your physical life, that is his response to 2 weeks into World War II. Before there was anything yet, there was nothing yet that was directed as a campaign against Jewish people in particular. It was just 2 weeks into the war. And already people were frightened, and already people were traumatized. And he was saying, it's okay to go to God with whatever you need to ask for. But human suffering is not only a fact and a reality of being human, it's not just physical, though. It's not just physical. You're worrying about your grandson having trouble in his Gan here in Israel, and you're in the United States. That's suffering. And no one can take that away. No one can judge. Well, people can try to take it away. People can try to judge it, but it's really not judgeable. And,
Right.
and no one, it's a savta, it's a grandmother who's concerned about the well-being of her grandson. Maybe ask the divine within you for a little oomph. Okay, Sarah Joy.
Thank you, Yiska. This was a really big opening for me, and I'm going to also keep it short. It was all about what to do with my fears, and the answer I got was don't stay small, just trust and really go in and find the words. It's hard for me to find the words to talk to God, but I feel like God's there. And this was just really powerful. You know, if those who are in the Warsaw Ghetto and then in the concentration camps and going through all of that, you know, the things I'm going through are relatively small compared to that. And yet I'm not self-expressing in certain areas, that I'm not advocating for myself. I'm letting things go. And this just really is questioning that, being in that place of fear, just embracing it and say, this is hard. And can I find the words? So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to caution everyone, please don't fall into the trap of diminishing, of judging your own feelings. What can I complain about? Look what they went through. Well, look what they went through, but I'm not them and they're not me. And anyway, what they would want is for me to be able to complain about what I'm complaining about, which is nothing compared to what they were suffering. But all of that, first of all, it doesn't get us anywhere. We don't sense the divine presence. We're not being kind to ourselves. How can I be kind to others? How can I be compassionate to other people's suffering when I'm already judging mine? So thank you for the depth and the wealth of your insight, Sarah Joy. And we shall conclude with Tiferet. Tiferet, yes.
Thank you, Yiska. I apologize with my image there. I don't know what's happening with my computer, but we're looking at transcending the uncertainty of the times we're living in. And we have our own time of uncertainty right now, and we should not diminish it. Look, we're here meeting because we have COVID. We're you know, look at the politics of the day, look at the climate. what's going on with us, our struggles and our concerns and our losses are present and are real. And we don't know, like the Rebbe didn't know, we don't know what's coming down the pipe for us. But I am so, so grateful, Yiska. You know, I've been with you in many, many classes, and I'm so grateful to see other co-travelers here with me again. And you're bringing the blessing of transcendence, glimpses of transcendence and moments of transcendence through teaching this and bringing him and yourself to us. And I am so grateful. And during the meditation, yes, I was thinking, you know, what is it to be created in the image and to be created out of love, and to want then to be the best piece of art that I can be, to bring that joy and maybe even some peace to God.
Mm.
Through us bringing beauty, reflecting beauty.
And
So
that's
thank
beautiful.
you for this. Thank you for this.
You are so welcome.
I'm always so moved by you, and you know that
Mm.
that's true. Thank you.
Toda, Tiferet, Toda. Toda for manifesting so much Tiferet. And on that note, as we say, Lehitlaot, I urge all of you who signed up for the one class, if you feel moved, if you feel inspired, join us. We'd love to have, we have a great group. And it's not only the teachings of the Piasetzna, it's not only my sharing with my love of these Torot, it's the Chevra, it's us together. We really form an amazing society of a B'nai Machshava Tova, of a people of conscious community. This is what the Rebbe was wanting in the late 20s when he wrote that book, as he taught that group of people that he worked with spiritually. So this is our B'nai Machshava Tova, even with or without COVID, because AJS started by Rav Daniel before COVID. It peaked, of course, during COVID. It's still going strong, thank God, when COVID is not as present, where people are going back in person, like at Pardes. I'm teaching in person in Pardes. I don't know what I would do without you all, though. So this is my selling pitch, so to speak. I'm really encouraging, if you liked the class today, and if there's any financial issue at all, and I'll put Rav Daniel's email in the email when I send out the recording, email Rav Daniel. We have sliding scales, we have subsidized tuition. I could not go to sleep at night with these teachings that I teach, knowing that someone is not registering because they can't afford the tuition. So everyone has to pay something. And most people pay the full tuition, but don't let it stop you. Please, please, don't let it stop you from jotting a quick email to Rav Daniel and asking for a subsidy. That's part of what AJS and the faculty do. Okay, Chevra, you'll hear from me tomorrow in an email. It was lovely, and it was great seeing and connecting and sharing and sitting with all of you. And I look forward to those who will be with us next week, Bezrat Hashem. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Greet the king in the field. This is the time of closeness. And I bless that you discover a new part of yourselves within and beyond. All my love. Kol Tuv.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.